Yesterday, I had the privilege of being with 3 of my grandchildren, ages 12, 10, and 8. First, we went to a soccer match, and then their father had something to do, so they came to my place, and we went to the pool and played around. Well, the conversation came up because when they're there, they usually help me fill the bird feeder. I have a tree outside the kitchen window, bird feeder on it. And the bird seed kept disappearing really fast. And so we were trying to figure out what to do about that and why it was disappearing so fast. Well, one day I happened to look out early in the morning, and there was a very healthy-looking, hungry squirrel. Upside down, the tail was going like this, just having a feast on the bird seed. So we were discussing how to keep the seed for the birds, and the 8-year-old spoke up and said, "Well, the squirrels need food too." So the rest of the ride, we talked about how we could have food out for the squirrel and also birds. So it was a very innovative talk, and I learned about duck feeders. I didn't know what duck feeders were, the feeders you put on the docks for the ducks and so forth. So I learned quite a bit of that kind of going. But what was so wonderful is the 8-year-old thought it was perfectly fine for the squirrel to be eating the seeds. And so that thinking was, even though it's bird seed and a bird feeder, it's really not limiting our thought that it can only be that way. So it opened up a whole new experience and a whole new way of thinking. It was sort of out of the box. It's okay to have food for everyone. And that's love in action. Love in action for the squirrel, as well as for the birds. So something came to my attention this week, and the title is, "What is emerging from the rock?" What is emerging from the rock? Well, Michelangelo just had this thing about emerging figures from the rock. And in his lifetime, he worked on over 40 statues, but completed less than half of them. The statues he finished are still some of the greatest works of art the world has ever seen. I've seen some of them in person. The David is in Florence, and it's a huge statue of David. I was fortunate enough to go into where it was being displayed early in the morning before a lot of the other tourists got there. And the sun was coming in through one of the windows, shining on his face. It was a wonderful experience. I'll never forget that. But when Michelangelo looked at that rock, in his mind, you see, he already saw David in the rock. He knew what he was going to help emerge from this rock. And the ones he has never finished, he started. I didn't see these, but there's a collection of the ones he didn't finish, and it's on display somewhere in Italy. So in these blocks of marble, perhaps one would have a hand, one would have a foot, one would have part of the head. They were just not really finished. He was reported to have said every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it's the task of the sculptor to discover it. So no matter why he didn't finish some and did build some, the point is that within every block of marble there is something to be sculpted. So many of us are like that. We have unseen potential within us. And maybe it takes a lifetime for it to be revealed. But there is this infinite potential within each one of us, so we can consider ourselves, I guess, as potential statues or blocks of marble. And even though it may take a lifetime to reveal what this is, it's really sad when we leave the planet without having realized as much as we could. And I think in my experience is that the longer I live, the more I think about that. You know, some people call it the bucket list. What is it you want to get done before you leave the planet? One of the things I wanted to do resulted in my new book. I had written many spiritual treatments or affirmative prayers for Creative Thought magazine, which were published. And they came out every month or every other month, and something like that. And I kept thinking, I wanted to put them in a collection. If I don't put them in a collection, they're going to get lost. They're going to get lost somehow. And so that was, you might say, one of the things on my bucket list. I wanted to have them in a collection so that I could hand them to my grandchildren, hand them to my family, have them available for you so that you have this. And in a way, it was like my making this book out of a block of marble. So it was my way of doing that. And I think each one of us has something unique within you. And Martha Graham says, and I have that quote in the book, if you don't express what is unique in your life in some way, it'll never get expressed because each person is unique. And so each one of us is this block of marble, and we're actually the sculptors. Each one of us is the sculptors working on our block. There's a writer, Brian Tracy, who said, "The potential of the average person is like a huge ocean unsailed, a new continent unexplored, a world of possibilities waiting to be released and channeled towards some good. But do they know it? Do we know it? That we have this unending, infinite potential within us because each one of us is an expression of the divine. And there's no limit, you see, to that uniqueness. And each one of us is a special part of that. So do we see all that we can become? Do we see all of our possibilities? Are we willing to feed the squirrels as well as the birds? Are we willing to open our minds to new possibilities? How great a tragedy it is to live a life and never emerge from the rock. Never even realize how magnificent we are. So you might ask yourself, what will it take for me to break free of the stone and take the shape of thy infinite possibilities? And I know my experience has been that ideas come to me, and many times I'm just overwhelmed with all of the ideas that come to me to do. And sometimes I put them on the back burner, as the expression goes, and just let them stay there. But my experience also is that if I ignore them, and they're really something that I had meant to express, it's going to just keep coming back and back and back. And so we need to pay attention to what it is within each one of us that keeps coming up for us to explore, for us to do, for us to give, whatever it is. And I challenge you that when these thoughts come to you, to take some action. Take some kind of action on it. Even if it's a phone call, even if it's just writing down a couple words that may be used in that direction, whatever it is. Take some action on it. Because when we start taking action on it, we then find out how to do it. We find out how to express our uniqueness more and more. So that's getting ourselves out of that block of marble is celebrating love in action. We're taking some action on expressing our uniqueness. A favorite story is one day a little boy picked up a bag of Twinkies, a couple of bottles of root beer, and he headed for the park. And he said to himself, well, I've been wanting to talk to God. Maybe I'll find him there. So he headed for the park, and there was only one person in the park, and it was a rather elderly woman. And she was sitting on a bench, and he went over and sat on the other end of the bench. And he waited for a while. And she was just looking at the birds and the pigeons and the squirrels. And pretty soon he got hungry and he opened up his bag of Twinkies. And he decided, well, maybe she would. So he offered her a Twinkie, and then one's never enough when you have something like that. So he got his second one out, and he offered her a second Twinkie. And she took it, and they sat on the bench eating their Twinkies, and then he got thirsty, and he remembered he had 2 bottles of root beer. So he opened one, and he offered the other one to her, which she accepted. And so they sat there drinking their root beer and finishing up their Twinkies. And eventually it started getting dark. And they hadn't spoken the whole time, and just enjoying each other's company and eating the Twinkies and the root beer. And it began to get dark, and we thought, well, he better get home. His mother would be worried about him. And she said, what have you been doing? And he said, well, I went to the park and I met God. And you know what? She's got a great smile. But at that same time, the elderly woman entered her home where she lived with her son, who said, Mom, you were gone a long time today, and you look so radiant. What did you do? Well, she said, I was in the park today, and I met God. And you know what? He's a lot younger than I would have thought. So all of the people you see, including yourself, is an expression of the one power and presence. That's who you are. One of my teachers said, of course, when we were talking about this, some people disguise it more than others. So the suggestion is, from telling this story, is that each person we meet and each person on the planet is an expression of God, of the Spirit, of this individualization of the one power and the presence. And love in action means giving the very best of ourselves to all the people and activities that we're engaged with. Giving the best of ourselves. That's a way of service. And it's a way of putting love in action, of giving our best. It took me quite some time to realize that by overgiving, you might say, or giving more than is expected of me, is really to my benefit. Do more than is expected of you, and by doing that, you're putting the universe in debt to you. So if you're, let's just say, you have this particular job or position, or it may be a volunteer job, whatever it is, do more than is expected, and what happens is the universe repays you. It may not come from the people you're working for. It may not come from where you would think it would come from, but it'll come. The scales of justice are there. So if you give more, you're going to receive more. And giving more is putting love in action. Here's a modified version of the Beatitudes that I want to share with you. Blessed are those who love, for as love spreads throughout the earth, they shall be deeply loved. Blessed are the grateful, for their attitude of gratitude increases and returns the bounty of life. Whatever we're grateful for, the universe gives us more of. Blessed are the healers, for their world and they too shall be well. Blessed are those who listen, for they shall be heard and understood. And I read somewhere recently that true listening is when you really are open to what the other person is saying without thinking of what you're going to reply. How many times do we one of us say to that? You know? True listening is simply accepting what the other person is saying without judgment and without being concerned about what you're going to say next. See, that's not really listening to the other person. Blessed are those who choose to be kind rather than right, for they shall create long-lasting, beautiful relationships. A story came to my mind about a woman who went to a therapist, and she was complaining that her husband and she were having all kinds of arguments. It just constantly went on. What can she do? How can she control her husband and get him to quit arguing? The therapist thought for a while. He said, well, get some mouthwash. And every time your husband starts complaining, put a little in your mouth and start swishing. And swish for about 10 minutes. So she started doing that. And it worked, and the argument sort of subsided. She went back to her therapist. She said, well, you know what you suggested worked. She said, but I don't understand how it worked. And he said, well, it's very simple. You kept your mouth shut. So, think about it. You may want to start switching sometimes. Gosh. And remember that all of this advice is for ourselves, not for someone else. My father would, after church, we'd get in the car, and he'd look over at my mother and he'd say, well, I hope you listened well to that. You sure needed it. And we had a tendency to do that. Sometimes, when we get a wonderful idea, if so-and-so could only understand this. But what it is, you see, we need to get it. We're the first ones to get it. Blessed are those who know how to give and to receive, for inexhaustible richness is theirs. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall find peace and well-being. Blessed are those who notice, for they shall find small delights around every corner. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not get bent out of shape. That's my favorite. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not get bent out of shape. So those are the ways to put love into action. And if it takes swishing, put some water or mouthwash in your mouth and swish for 10 minutes, if that's what it takes. So those are ways of putting love in action. And I also want to share with you the Optimist Creed, which is written by Christian Larson. Promise yourself to be so strong that nothing can disturb your peace of mind. Nothing. To talk health, happiness, and prosperity to every person you meet. No more moaning and groaning about this and about that. No. To make all your friends feel there's something worthwhile in them. To look at the sunny side of everything and make your optimism come true. To think only of the best, to work only for the best, and to expect only the best. That means not having a plan B. Expect only the best. To be just as enthusiastic about the success of others as you are about your own. to forget the mistakes of the past. That's one, isn't it? To forget what we consider the mistakes of the past and press on to the greater achievements of the future. You see, if we dwell on what we consider the shoulda, woulda, couldas of the past, we're going to get more of them. So we need to let those go. To wear a cheerful expression at all times and give a smile to every living creature you meet. To give as much time improving yourself that you have no time to criticize anyone else. To be too large for worry, too noble for anger, too strong for fear, and too happy to remit the presence of trouble. To think well of yourself and to proclaim this fact to the world, not in loud words, but in great deeds. You see, by putting love in action. To live in the faith that the whole world is on your side, so long as you are true to the best that is within you. Be true to the best that is in you. So, you are this block of marble, and you are the sculptor. And you can work on yourself in that way. And be so busy working on yourself that you have no time nor interest to criticize anyone else. And so it is.
So it is.